So we're going to get started, and I just wanted to, thank everybody for joining today. I recognize so many of the names on the website. So this is terrific. I think we have about 50 people joining us today to talk about the new NACHA rule updates for ACH originators, and also the fraud monitoring requirements that NACHA requires now for ACH originators. So just want to make sure you can see my screen. Perfect. So today's topics are going to be related to the new operating rules through NACHA. We're going to provide an overview of some of the required changes for ACH originators. Uh, in addition to that, some recommendations for a risk monitoring policy that ACH originators are required to have. Um, in addition to that, we're going to talk about some fraud awareness and fraud monitoring recommendations and some training recommendations that you can use for your employees, that some tools that'll be available to assist you as well. So I'm Ed Scow. I am the Director of Treasury Management for our commercial clients here at South Shore Bank. And additionally, I have two guests with me today. I have Bud Peets and John Flory from Harbor IT. And Bud and John have expertise in the area of cybersecurity and fraud mitigation. So I'd like to introduce Bud and John. And would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Sure, I'll go first, and then John will follow up. I'm Roland Peets, but Ed called me Bud, and you can too. 31 years in cybersecurity. Maybe I've been in it longer than some of you have been born. I don't know. It seems like it's been a long time. I've seen a lot over the years, and one thing that's persistent, even though it's renamed and changed the name of it, is the threat vectors that we're attacked on every day. And some of the commonality there is like email, for example, but now you add similar threats like um, texting. And the threat actors like to try to take advantage of our good nature through social engineering. But we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. But at USA Today, I was the chief privacy officer. So understanding the importance of security and privacy and consumers' private information. And before that, I was the chief information security officer. But I love consulting. That's what I do at Harbor IT. And I work closely with John, my really good friend, and I'll turn it over to John.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Bud. First of all, thank you for having us. This is a great topic, and it's impactful, and it's something that we're getting hit with every day. So we're going to be able to give you some actionable, great outcomes here. I'm John Flory. I created Harbor Shield Cybersecurity along with Bud Peets. It's now Harbor IT's managed cybersecurity arm. Today's about you. If there are any questions, anything pops in your mind, please ask us. You have experts here, and we're willing to help you. I spend a lot of my time in incident response because it's my passion. So I help people when they're being attacked. So it gives me a great view of what's going on. And as far as insider threat and fraud, it's rampant right now, like levels we've never seen before. And there's so many tools available and services are available that you don't even need skills for, that it's something that you really need to be aware. So thank you very much for having me. And Ed, back to you.
Great. Thanks, John. So we're going to jump into the NACHA operating rules. We're going to jump right into that. After this training session, we're also going to send out a link to a page on our website so that you can access the slides that we're sharing today as well as the recording. The slides will have a lot of detail that you can reference when creating your own policies and procedures. We may not touch on every bullet in detail, but I believe that the information is available so that you can reference it for your own specific needs. We will hold a question and answer session at the end. And after that, do not hesitate to contact me or anyone on my team or John or Bud if you have any questions as you start to update your policies and procedures. And our contact information will be at the end of the presentation. And as I mentioned before, we'll send an email out with a link so you'll have access to all that information for future reference. So as we jump into this, there's the primary topics for today are going to be creating a risk-based monitoring program to detect unauthorized ACH transactions. And also there's a new standard description for payroll transactions. So the primary piece today is really about the risk-based monitoring, but there are a few quick rules that we'll go over as well. So starting in March 20th, NACHA required all payroll transactions to include the word payroll as the first 7 characters in the ACH transaction description. There are some other changes that have been made, but from our client base, this is really one that we just need to reach out to our clients and make sure everybody is updating. In this slide, you can see I included an example if you're using our platform and providing a template where it shows you in the template description, I placed an arrow there, you can see you just need to put in their payroll. And as we look at transactions through the bank now, I can see that a lot of clients are doing that already, but if you're not, you definitely want to update that for you. The reason why you want to do that is by standardizing payroll as a description, it provides banks the ability to monitor the transactions and identify payroll. And what we see a lot with fraudsters is them redirecting payroll transactions. So by noting it, banks are able to monitor that transaction much better. In addition to that, as we look at fraud monitoring, we're going to spend some time talking about implementing an internal fraud monitoring procedure that's really going to reduce the risk of unauthorized payments and authorized payments through false pretenses. Unauthorized payments are most often a result of a user's online credentials being compromised. And then authorized payments made under a false pretense happens when a vendor's email is compromised. So I'm going to transition over to Bud and John to talk a little bit more about these topics.
Yeah, great.
Yep.
Yeah, great. So we want to start by showing what the fraud triangle is, and I'm going to give you my definition of it, what I see, and then I'm going to kick it over to Bud. But fraud triangle: A, opportunity; B, need; but the third part of that triangle is justification. So that's something I want you to think about a lot when it comes to fraud. Is they feel justified. So it's something that's very dangerous and very hard. With all the technologies and everything that's available today, still the number one way we're detecting fraud is by word of mouth. It's by see something, say something. So in your organization, is there a way for employees to anonymously say that they're seeing something? Really important and something to think about. So Bud, let's see what you have on this.
Yeah, just real quick. Fraud's always been an issue, right, for a very long time for all of us on this call. With the onset of AI, artificial intelligence, it's made the equation even more difficult to manage, to detect, to respond. So those are issues that we need to be aware of in technology that's front and center that we need to address through that fraud triangle and overall attack chain.
Yeah, we see it all the time from a breach perspective. Is there somebody on the inside that has some type of rationalization? And let's face it, greed is a big part of it. So That's great. Go to the next slide, Ed. Ed, do you have anything you wanted to say on that before we go
No,
on the
thank
broad
you.
triangle? Yeah, so business email compromise. This is the biggest threat out there right now. The criminals don't need to scan the world anymore. They can just log in because people are passworded out. They have so many different passwords that what they end up doing is using their work credentials when they're opening up an account, when they're getting a free application, etc. And they're not realizing that this information is being sold clear text, which means you can just read it immediately. And cyber criminals with AI now have access to this information. And you don't need to be a hacker or have any skills anymore because they are pay per performance as a service models. Meaning, if you're looking to get some information to hack somebody to do a business email compromise, um, you can pay $5 and have that done for you. So that's the danger in it. And another danger is it's very hard to detect. So on a business email compromise, somebody has your credentials or they've stolen a cookie token, which is a way that these criminals are now getting around MFA. So you want multi-factor, you want that second check, but it's not foolproof. And we're going to talk about it, but I'll give you an example. Say I use my information somewhere, these cyber criminals get in it, they take over, they log in as me, and then I start communicating with you. The difficulty in that for you and your systems and all your defenses and everything you have into place. That's why these conversations are so important because this is the last line of defense. We're going to talk about insurance, but this is the last line of defense we're talking about right now. Because when you hover over, it is me because somebody logged in as me. And your email filter, you think, oh, we have IT, they're going to help us, we're going to be bailed out. Your email filter has me as a trusted sender and it is me. So it's not going to help you. There might be some technologies that are coming out that are getting better with tonality and those type of applications. But the bottom line is this: the red flags are important, and I know you preach this. I know you're regulated, many of you, and you get security awareness training. But these things, I'm going to let Bud talk about them a little bit more. You have to look for them every time. You can't trust who you're communicating with anymore. We're going to talk about deep fakes and voice and video and all that also, which is just a reality right now. When people used to call me and I didn't know who they were, I might answer, I might say something. It takes 5 seconds of your voice, okay, for AI to be able to replicate your voice and be able to make this very dangerous. But talk about the red flags and then the control.
Sure. Just real quick, John and I have these type of incidents that we respond to frequently, and one in particular is two educational organizations in California. One organization had an email compromise, so a business email compromise. Threat actor sent an invoice. With they had to have some familiarity with the two organizations. They sent an invoice, changed some banking information. The receiver of that, the other organization, processed the change without validation. So when the originating company was like, "Hey, where's just calling to check on the payment of this invoice," they're like, "Oh, we paid that $400,000, 2 months ago." So, the time elapsed was significant, creating a scenario where it was really hard for any type of recourse, right? So, and we got engaged, and I actually landed on the side. Not that I'm taking sides here; I'm trying to solve problems and manage risk. But the company that processed that change, to me, were the ones that were left holding the bag, right? Even though the email account for the other organization was compromised, the organization that issued the payment didn't validate the change before they processed it. That's a real problem, and I don't know where that ended up. I was going to litigation, for example. So, really the business email compromise, maybe more so than phishing now, although it's a form of that, is really creating a lot of havoc for a lot of organizations. I think we had 6 or 7 that we responded to last year. So, but the red flags, similar to what you would see in email, urgent request. The threat actor may create a similar like domain and email address to try to spoof it, to fool you. They may send information off hours. Just really difficult. So having a process on the back end, and you may already have this, but just to validate, if you get a request for change, whether it's for, some kind of AP or accounts payable or accounts receivable, and more importantly, maybe really important for your employees is when there's an employee payroll change, call the person back at a known number, validate the change, and have multiple controls in place that require 2 people to process a request. So there's a theme here, and you're going to see it emerge as we go forward. So that's all I had for that. I don't know, Ed, if you had anything to add there or not.
No, not at this point. John, do you want to talk a little bit about bank impersonations?
Oh yeah, yeah. So this is a trend, and voice is the biggest trend. It's called vishing, right? Phishing is the email. Vishing is V with the voice, and even smishing, which is SMS, right? These are on the rise, but this is huge. You have a lot of doors to get in, literally, in what you guys do for a living. So this is very, very important. They'll call you and impersonate your IT department, say, hey, we understand, or this just happened, we spotted this, and we'd like you to take this action. So the bottom line is this: for everything we're talking about today, we need to have education, we need to have policy, and we need to have process. And it needs to be written or it's not real, because our people are getting hit with these from every different direction. And if they don't have a clear, understandable direction, it's going to create problems. So the bottom line is this: what we're talking about today, when you go back to your institutions, you need to understand, do we have policy? Have the users signed off on it? Is it one page and understandable for the users? Have we talked to them about these things? This is great what we're doing today, because this education is huge and it's really vital. So, vishing is voice impersonation, or not impersonation. They're calling you, and it catches people. Sometimes they have a crying baby. I'm not joking. There are many different tactics that they use to divert, or to make you not see that there's a gorilla in the room. So you need to have a verification, just like Bud said, and it's got to be trusted verification. And Bud, I know we've dealt with quite a few cases where the FBI, et cetera, was involved, and criminals impersonate the FBI on a breach, right?
Yeah,
So
we've
talk a
seen that
little
a
bit
few
about
times.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, we've seen that a few times. You just the thing that comes to mind. You may have heard the phrase "trust but validate." I flip that. I'm like, let's validate and then trust, and then follow our process, our protocols. Once we can validate the legitimacy of the person on the other end, the request type, those are really important things that we need to consider. And actually, looking at the red flags here, verify account numbers, login credentials, tokens, instructions. That's a way for the threat actor to extract that data out of whoever's answering that call and trying to help, right? So the key here is, like, we don't share credentials. We never share credentials. We shouldn't anyways. And if you're going to, work with someone, call them back at a known trusted number. And again, one of those themes that prevail through many of the topics that we have here today.
Yeah, I would just point out that we will never call you and ask you for your credentials
That's
or
right.
ask information about the accounts. we have that information, so there's no reason for the bank to ask for it. I know that we've sent out a few messages on our platform when we see a spike in these activities happening. And I just wanted to thank you for calling us and providing us feedback when you receive those calls and the information that you obtain about the caller. That is really helpful for us. We do communicate it back out to clients that we're seeing a spike in that. So we really appreciate your engagement and your providing us feedback on what you're seeing out in the marketplace.
Is there any questions, by the way, on business email compromise? Does everybody understand what it is? And there's no dumb questions here. Is it resonating?
Yeah, I think we have one hand up here. I don't know if it's a question or.
It's not really a question. I just wanted to make a statement that a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago, exactly what you're talking about with the voicing or whatever you're calling it,
Phishing. Yeah.
occurred with our company. And what they did was they selected an employee that had, we have segregated duties. And so even though titles may look or appear that they would have certain types of security, this employee did not. And just exactly what you were saying, they were called, had all of our information called from the bank number.
Right.
Somehow they impersonated the bank telephone number.
Yeah.
And
Spoofing.
went through all of this information. And then I got a call and I said, no, the bank is never going to call.
Right.
But funny enough, the woman who was doing the fraud kept me on the phone, and I said, I have to call my team at the bank. And I said, can you hold on? I'll put a third party, conference call. She said, well, we cannot discuss anything with a third party. And I said, okay, then why don't you hold on? I'll go to another line, call the bank. They still hung on. They're very, very resistant. I mean, we did find out it was fraud prior to doing anything, but they are very insistent and very persistent with getting the information.
Oh, yeah. It's a money game. So, Kate, first of all, thank you very much for that story. That's really great. And your persistency, right? Because they will convince you. They are very, very good, well-funded, generally, with very high-paid people doing these jobs. There's no covering up a digital footprint. So we could go after the criminals. And if they try to cover it up, at least more of a footprint. But the reality is this: they're in areas we can't touch them. They're non-extraditable treaties, etc., that are in place. So the reality is, man, we're getting attacked with some of the best talent in the world that are getting paid like that. So we need to understand it's not the prince anymore. And then when we have AI, the intelligence of something they got on you, your dog, 2 years ago, your dog's name, because they got it in this location. And then 1 year ago, they got this on you. What AI does is it takes all of it and puts it together right for the criminals. SIM swaps are very common right now. People are just calling the telephone, Verizon, and they have enough information to make your cell phone appear on their phone and disappear on yours. So we need to be cognizant and vigilant ourselves in what we're doing out there. It's TMI. So just understand that and act that way when you proceed. Account takeover. Bud, hit this one.
Yeah, sure. The easiest way, the threat actors, they can try to hack into our technology, but the easiest way for them is to steal credentials, access your account directly. That's why, it's important for everyone here, use strong multi-factor authentication across all of your accounts and unique passwords. I probably have 500 passwords, but that's how I manage it. I'm also, and I don't know if John so much, but I am like really resistant to social media. You can find me on LinkedIn, but you don't see I don't do a lot of activity. I want to keep a low profile, but the red flags relative to account takeover, new templates, unusual timing, or velocity or relative to the types of and number of requests for that would lead to an unauthorized change from an ACH perspective. So I mentioned multi-factor authentication. That's prevalent through many of the controls that we like to see. And then, on top of it, it's not just security is not just a one-trick pony, right? It's defense in depth, multiple elements of your program, including strong access controls and monitoring and logging of activities so that we can detect fraud when it occurs, hopefully, right? And then also at the end of this training, both from a consumer and an employee perspective, right? So we got to be good stewards out there and provide the data that people can understand and act on when the time it comes and make the best decision for them and any of the organizations that are represented here today.
Really, really good. Two things. Social media, please go on your own social media and your business's social media and make sure you have multi-factor turned on immediately. That doesn't mean you're going to have to do it every time. It means when you go to a different device or when you're at a different location, you're going to have to do it, because when that gets taken over, it's really ugly and it's terrible, and it's a big thing. And as far as fraud and passwords, we help on investigations, and we just had somebody, and this guy, I know what his password is very well because he used it everywhere, and it was income 25 bang. Okay, so that's this guy's password, and he's a crook. And we knew that password because it was being sold all over the place, because when you put your password in, they sell it. Even if it's a fresh password, they're still selling it. So we saw this guy uses this as his password. And what he did was he got a bunch of burner email accounts, different names at Gmail or whatever else. And he was committing fraud with these accounts. But you know what his password was? Income 25 bag. It took us that long to catch him. So you have to be really careful with your passwords right now and change them. And Bud has 50,000 passwords he does not remember. He's got a password manager. So contact us so we can talk to you about that also. Bud, back to you.
Yeah, some people are afraid of the password managers, the vaults. I have one that I really like called Password Keeper. LastPass has had some issues, and they're all fairly good. But I like Keeper. I've had it for about 12 years, and my wife and I share passwords that way. We need to, but everything's unique, and we change frequently. But relative to this particular tactic, a credit push fraud, may get a phone call, may get an email, but the recipient or the victim is going to get coached, right? Under deception, social engineering, strapping data together that they may find out in your social networking sphere that you're a part of. And then I tell you what, if you ask my mother-in-law, who's been hit about 5 times, it's real and it happens a lot. And once you get on a list, you're on that list. It's like if a company gets breached, they're on a hit list, and it can potentially keep happening if you don't change your tactics and your approach to protect yourself. So the control here is making sure that everyone's aware of what social engineering is, and that's what the threat actors, the fraudsters use to manipulate us and try to take advantage. As humans are good nature, we want to inherently help people. They may take advantage of that and try to engineer us in that manner. So just being aware, get a phone call out of the blue. By the way, I'm like John, I will hardly ever answer a phone call. And I'll wait for the voicemail, then I'll decide if I'm going to call them back. I got one today, and I'm like, yeah, this doesn't seem right. I'm gonna call you back at a number I know. And the call ended abruptly, so I'll find out when I call back if it was legitimate or not. But it's just really important. And then monitoring is a huge part of what we do overall as any organization. Monitoring, looking for those trends and emerging threats that end up as fraud. So that's an important piece too.
Yeah, really good. And then when we talk about this last one, the fake invoices, purchase order scams, like I was saying before, it's not the prints anymore. Now it's AI. It's very easy for them to knock this off. They can literally just put it in an AI model and get the same exact thing. It's even harder than this. Sometimes there are no red flags. You have to be really, really careful about the source. Make sure you have the double verification. You know, when it comes to domain spoofing, that's how a lot of times they're phishing us. And it made me think of something. Domain spoofing is these crooks knock off a domain that's very similar to yours. And you're just looking and you think, and that's how they get, somebody to put in credentials or to do an action that they want them to do. Most will catch it. A lot of email filters will catch it, but some don't, right? And it's a numbers game for them. So we just had one where we helped these people. It was a phishing and then business email compromise, all this, and it was part of a domain, and they had two V's instead of a W.
Yeah.
And let me tell you something, that would have fooled me, right? So just be extra vigilant.
Yeah, John stole my thunder on that one because I love that story. I feel bad for the company, but yeah, the first letter of their company name started with a W, so the threat actor just spliced two V's together, spoofed the picture, created a domain of with their logo on that domain, and actually the CFO fell for it. He was ground zero for a business email compromise and this spoof domain that included spoofed email addresses. So that one, luckily, they caught on pretty early, but it cost them money. They had to remediate. And in that particular case, they had a breach. They lived in that company originated out of Massachusetts. So, all of a sudden they had to contact the Massachusetts Attorney General and report a breach. So, it's so scary out there. Everyone's out to get us, right? We're the good guys, but we got to be always on guard.
Yeah, the new routing numbers, that's immediate, right? That's a red flag. So it was a good slide.
100%. Yeah. So, I think we're flipping this back over to Ed, but at this point, but account takeover, user authentication, assessing the risk, and hopefully, the access that's granted is legitimate. But in a business email compromise, the chain may be perfect, and you could end up with fraud regardless at the end. And that's the root of business email compromise, is to enact financial fraud, right? So there's just an easy vehicle. Or just John mentioned how organized these organizations are, with call centers, hundreds of people. It's so easy from an email perspective to have your email harvested and 100,000 emails sent out a day by these organizations. If they hit on 1% of those and commit fraud through that 1%, they're making money, right? Through whatever means they are. Some of the things we talked about here. Another one is ransomware, right? Getting someone to click on a link, and then we've had two in the last year, large organizations, ultimately were ransomed, everything locked down. And Harbor IT came in, we were able to resolve those issues for them, but for them, it took them 2 months because they didn't have good backups in place. So, it's real, it happens. And just because an organization's small doesn't mean a thing. 46% of all breaches occur to SMB type organizations. Threat actors like small organizations because they think that there's a lack of controls and protection, and it's easier for them to navigate and wreak havoc and fraud because the controls aren't there necessarily. And of those 46% of those organizations, I think the number was like 25% do not recover and go out of business because of the fraud or the incident that occurred. So it's real and present for everyone, not just big organizations, smaller ones as well.
Ed, you hit these.
Yep, thank you. So, what we put together as a bank is some of the controls that we believe may not eliminate fraud, but greatly reduces fraud working with companies like yours. And the first one that we always talk about is segregating duties at your company, also known as dual control for payments. So dual control is a very strong internal control. So it helps with internal fraud when there's two people, reviewing a payment before it goes out. But it also can stop fraudulent payments if your credentials are compromised, because it requires somebody or a user to initiate a payment and another user to approve the payment. So we have seen in cases where one user's credentials become compromised and that payment is saved from going out because the approver is notified about the payment and is not aware of that payment supposed to be going out. So that's very helpful in fighting fraud with ACH payments and wires. The other piece is to review all your prior day's transactions. Uh, Looking at your full day of your transactions and noting if anything doesn't look accurate or you're not sure what it is, you should immediately reach out to our service team or to your treasury management relationship manager and talk to them about it. We can get more information about that payment. Where it may not be quite clear to you, it could very well be a legitimate payment, but we can check that for you. But it's really important to review transactions every single day. And then the other piece is to provide ongoing employee training for your team about potential fraud attempts and really how to recognize these attempts through email, phone, texts, faxes, even mail transactions. So having an ongoing training session where you're walking through some examples every quarter with your team, and there's ways that you can test your team. You can do email tests as well, and we'll be able to talk about that a little bit more.
Real quick, Ed, if you don't mind, I got
Sure,
something on
yeah.
that last slide.
Yep.
If you have a small organization, and we're talking about implementing segregation of duties, if you have a small organization and you may have a person or two that wear multiple hats, and because of the nature of the organization, its structure, and its size, you may inherently create a segregation of duties conflict in that case. And when that happens, the monitoring is like really important. So you you may need to have an accounts receivable and accounts payable administrator have dual roles that conflict. But the compensating control for that is managers reviewing activity on a regular basis, and also setting expectations for that particular group of users to say, this is what we expect you to do. Here's the policy relative to that particular topic, and making sure it's clear that, and these are the use cases that you would do or take that we expect you to do in the course of doing your job. But here are the things that you'll never do. Create an accounts payable or accounts payable and accounts receivable record where there's an opportunity for fraud, right? So whatever that looks like, it's just important to think about that. And lastly, I know I got a lot to say on this topic, but with that in particular, when you create access, it's easy to say, well, create access the same as this other person for this new person. It's the other aspect of this is least privileged, right? And need to know. So you give them the least amount of access that they need, and only give them access to the things they need to see. So when you copy or model access after another user, you tend to have access sprawl across different domains and systems, whether it be on-site or in the cloud. You want to be careful of that, especially in these scenarios that we're talking about here today. So segregation of duty, enablement, compensating controls if you can't necessarily achieve that, and then least access, those are all really important in all types of user credentials, but in particular when we're talking about these topics here today. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on that one, but I thought it was important to pull some of those other elements into that conversation.
Great, thanks, Bud.
Yeah, you got it.
This slide is really talking about preventing and detecting corporate account takeover. And I think one area to you that's really important is using secure email whenever possible. So when you're exchanging sensitive information with vendors, sending a secure email, it'll protect your information, but it's also protecting your information from the vendor, where if the vendor's email is compromised, which is in many cases, that's where we see payments that are authorized but are fraudulent. That's where we typically see that is the vendor's email is compromised. So by using secure email, they're creating credentials in order to access that email, which is another layer on top of their email account. So we think that's very important. Also verify all payment instruction changes. We've mentioned that a couple of times, and I really can't mention enough. It's so important where your team should verify any payment changes directly with a vendor through a channel outside of email. Typically what I find is, when we're making $20,000 or $30,000 payments to a vendor, we know somebody personally over there, probably have their cell phone. You're probably a very important client of theirs. And it's a great opportunity to pick up the phone and ask, hey, bud, I got this email from you with some payment changes. Can you just verify this for me? Really important to do. That stops about 90% of what we see happen, today at the bank when it comes to payments like that. The other piece is never to disclose login credentials or account information to anybody. I know that sounds basic, but it happens. I've run into scenarios where there'll be, three people at a company using the same user ID. And so really with that, nobody knows what's happening. One user's getting a one-time passcode and the fraudster sends them a text and says, hey, can you give me the one-time passcode? And they think it's John, but it's Nat sending that text. It's the fraudster because they know that they've got John's cell information now. So I've seen that a couple of times. So everybody needs to have separate credentials, super important. And as we mentioned, if somebody calls you and says they're from South Shore Bank, I would just tell them thank you, and you'll reach out to a contact that you know, and reach out to somebody on our team. We can always, if we're not the right department, we're always going to connect you with the right people. And then the other piece is you want to create a business response plan. There's an outline. We'll provide you an outline for that as one of our resources on our resource page that we'll provide to you. And really, it'll provide you what are the steps you need to take if if you have an issue related to email credentials or online banking credentials. What is it that you need to do in order to address those and prepare for the next steps on that. So let's see. I think the next page we go to is we're going to talk about employee training recommendations to prevent phishing. And just going to jump right into the next page on that. So this is really about the phishing attempts, as Bud and John mentioned earlier. So areas to target in employee training for these phishing attempts is email phishing with some examples, as we mentioned before. They're different emails. When your team receives an email, that's different than a prior email. That's what we see a lot is I'll get an email from Bud, but it's a different email address. I may not know that. But if I scan, I kind of wave my mouse over Bud's email, I can see that it's not Bud. It's very clear it's somebody else. So it's really important that you scrutinize email addresses. View it compared to an email that was sent to you previously by that vendor. If it's different, pick up the phone. Really scrutinize payment changes, or any payment request with a sense of urgency where the vendor says you're late on that payment, we need payment today. That's typically what we see, when our clients run into these issues is it's an urgency, of the payment needs to get made right away. The other piece is when we talk about business email compromise from internal, we see a lot of this. Everybody's probably experienced this at one time or another, where there's an email that looks like it's coming from senior management, or it could be a text requesting, an urgent request specifically. And there's definitely a sense of urgency there. And the request is usually outside of normal approval process. So like Bud said, where we have policies and procedures that we always follow from a company perspective, these emails are trying to get around those procedures. So there's the urgency and it's coming from, senior management. We always need to go back to the approval process and make sure that the team understands there's an approval process that we don't deviate from. And that's again one of the areas where we see a lot of fraud that becomes successful. So I'm going to jump back to John and Bud to talk a little bit more about some of the other fraud attempts that we need to make sure our colleagues are aware of.
Yeah, and we're not going to take a long time on this, but smishing. So, there's phishing, email, vishing is voice, and then smishing is SMS. And they don't discriminate. They will take all of these or anything possible to get money. The one thing I will say is it's return on investment for these hackers, unless they're very mad at you or for some reason they hate you and want to go after you. But most of this is opportunistic. So you don't need to outrun the bear, but you need to outrun the next person, right? So the things that we're telling you today about passwords, etc., make you not low-hanging fruit. And if you're not low-hanging fruit and you're a pain for them to hack, they're going to move on. Like I said, unless they're upset. So that's why use all this stuff that we're talking about. Next, phone-based phishing. Yeah, we talked about it, and they're really, really good. Next, fake invoice, purchase order scam. Yeah, same type of thing. God, I'll let you take the next two. There's 3 and 4.
Yeah, sure. We talked about this before, but just making sure you have your protocols in place, being aware, looking for anomalies and changes. I mean, if a change comes in, we have a multi-person process to validate the change and calling the originator and then the approval chain that you have within your organization to actually affect change relative to that type of thing. And then number 4, I think this is the last one. I think I mentioned on the top 30 years ago on my first email-based virus that took down the email server for like 2 days. We had to rebuild it, restore from backups. That's this, right? This is just flipped 30 years later. Similar approach. Email is the easy, cheap method for the threat actor to come after any of us, right? So I know we talked about smishing a few minutes ago, but how many people on this call have received from the Thruway Authority? You have an unpaid toll, right? So it's all this social engineering and fake attempts to come after us, to get any of us to click, to take control of our devices, to steal our data. Just this one here has been around forever, as long as email's been around, 30 plus years, right? So just be aware and be vigilant.
Yeah, so here, tools to resist governance. And we talked about this. This is a verb, but it needs to be
Yeah.
created and then watched, right? So, do we have the correct policies that align to our business, our regulatory, our safety, everything? And do we have it written down? If it's not written, it's not real. Here's what happens: is somebody does something that is out of our control a lot of times, and then we get the knock on the door. This stuff is really important for you. So, do we have the policy? Do our users know what they do to do? Have they signed off on it? Are we monitoring it? Are we changing with the times like AI? AI is a real big problem right now because our users are using AI because it makes their jobs so much easier outside of what we're telling them to use. And it's going to bite a lot of people. But when we talk to people, many of them don't have a policy. So the user will simply say, I didn't know, right? So we need to have that policy agreed upon, signed off on, in place, and then have a incident response plan. I love how Ed talked about an incident response plan because time is everything for the criminals and for us when anything is going down. And when you have an incident response plan, make sure you have it written in paper and somewhere because if your systems are infected, we need to be able to get to it, right? Is there a way for us to communicate if we do have ransomware outside of band? These are all considerations that we need to have. And Bud, I'll let you take a couple of these other ones.
Yeah, just real quick. I know we're running short on time, but all these together is security enabled culture. Culture is so significant, and we don't talk about it enough. But to put all the pieces together here to protect your organization and your customers, your consumers, a culture within your organization is so critical. And it doesn't have to be super complicated. There are key controls we've already talked about, business controls and validation of changes. And then on the technical side, multi-factor authentication, for example, required and enabled, and using one of the authenticator apps. Microsoft has one. You probably all have seen it. Google has one. But those are trusted, validated, third-party authenticator apps that make this attack chain. You can kill it with some of those tools and techniques that you can implement within your organization.
John, you
And
want
I
to talk
think,
a little bit about cybersecurity insurance?
Yeah. So insurance is really important. So first of all, insurance is something that is a must at this point. We can help you. Contact Bud and I, and we can help you from insurance understand what it is, what protections do we need, what is the risk. It's something that's part of this defense posture that we're talking about. Now, it's important that you understand the insurers have a bottom line. They have a job, they have metrics, and in the end, they're really looking to reduce their payout and their risk. And sometimes that affects us. So that's why we want them as part of the plan, but have an incident response plan that is holistic, that we're not just calling the insurance because there is a time to call them, but it's got to be applicable. But it's really, really important to have. And we can help you understand what your risk is out there to make sure that you're having the proper coverage because it's really important that there's a few gotchas in there that we understand that. And then we also understand that sometimes they don't pay because they say it's misrepresentation in the checklist. So just have an ability to understand that what we're providing is laser accurate and we can help you match that accuracy to be able to get you good premiums, good coverage, etc. We work with the insurers all the time, and they're starting to become more proactive, which is really good. But the second part of it is they're really tightening up on did you comply before we pay you? And Bud, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
no, just real quick, we had a really big customer, $4 billion a year. Then they were hit by ransomware, and they weren't quite accurate in their application process and checked boxes that they didn't implement. So you know what happened after that. The story here is they didn't get paid, right? So they fronted all that money to recover with no support from their cyber insurer underwriter because they misrepresented. I'm not sure it was a misrepresentation, but the underwriter said so. Anyways, it happens more and more frequently.
Yeah, but there are ways to mitigate those controls, and it's a must. So please talk to
Yes,
us about it. Yeah.
yes, 100%.
This is great too. When it talks about the vendors, before we do this last slide, is a third party risk management program in your institution or in your business. So, who are our third parties? What information do they access? How risky is that? How do we categorize them and then make sure they're protecting our data? Because when these business email compromise happen, it's from a vendor almost always. And then the next thing that you're going to get asked is, hey, do you have a certificate awareness training certificate for this user that just fell victim to the business email compromise? Are you able to produce that? And then the next thing you're going to get asked is, do you have a third party vendor management program? Do you have these assessments? Do you understand the risks from the third parties? Do you have that documented? So those two things are really important. Ed, I don't know, do you want to hit this?
Yeah, John. So just a couple more items that I would say really help you reduce risk. And the first one is the bank provides the service Positive Pay, which provides you the ability to review ACH debits and checks that do not match a file that you provide the bank. So you can return the check or the ACH transaction, if it doesn't match with something that you issued or approved. So that's a key tool. We mentioned secure email for sensitive information. I'm not going to go over it again, but that's key. And again, I think you can find services pretty easily for that. So it can be added on top of what you have today. Um, we have the RSA tokens. Everybody here who uses payments is familiar with those. You can also use a token at sign-in if you'd like to. It's a secure feature. Rather than using a password every time, you're using your RSA token, which I think is a big improvement over just a password.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
We mentioned the dual controlment for payment processing. I think that's key. And then the last piece is online alerts. We require a number of different online alerts as users or administrators, but there's additional ones in there for account related alerts, transaction related alerts. So if you have an opportunity to quickly view them, it takes 5 minutes. You may want to add some. Additionally, you can add alerts to text, so you can receive them as a text if that's a better process, for you. A lot of us are on the road, not always in front of a computer, so text may be an option for you. The next page that I'm going to share with you are some resources. We're going to send a follow-up email with these slides so that you can take this information and use it. We're also going to send you a link to the webinar. So if you have other colleagues that you'd like them to listen to the recording, that'll be available for you. And also, as you can see, our contact information is here. So feel free to reach out to myself, reach out to my service team, reach out to your relationship manager if you'd like to talk more about some of these controls that we discussed. Where can I find information about our plans that are related to fraud monitoring, business action plans related to being compromised. So we can work with you on a lot of that as well. And obviously, John and Bud are available for that as subject matter experts.
Definitely.
So with that, I'm going to turn it over. I know we only have a minute or two. If you have to jump, I apologize for going a little bit longer, but we're happy to answer any questions that you might have at this time.
All right, we're on time then. You're armed, and we're here if you think of questions, please let us know. But thanks a lot for taking this time on this topic today.